allergy in our practice. Is it all related to vaccines? Well, I'm sure a large part of it, and in spite of that, see, I think unfortunately the eugenics aspect is 100% right. When you start taking a look at people like Bill Gates, and what is his job with what does he know about vaccines? Nothing. He said he knows it kills people. He has outwardly said we have to get rid of most people in this world. I tell you what we have to focus on, Alex. How do we help people? How do we save people? How do we save people from being exposed to having to take vaccines? And it's not getting easy anymore because hospitals are firing nurses who refuse to get flu vaccine. Flu vaccine, of all the stupidity that there is around, if anyone is still skeptical that any of these things make any difference, I want to show a couple of slides that I brought here. The first one I want to show is it's got a red slide, but the fourth or fifth one, where it shows the increase in mortality of children from flu over the last 10 years. You take a look, there was almost no death from children until they start giving the flu vaccine to children.
And again, we're on XM and over 100 AM and FM stations, but we're showing a graph for the legal record here on the video that hundreds of thousands will watch today, millions overall. And we're showing a graph here. In fact, blow that up, guys, where the blue part is filling the screen. Thank you. You can see there that as soon as they start giving the vaccine, that's when the flu vaccine, that's when suddenly the deaths from flu explode. And we have the Canadian studies last year, as you know, doctor, or 2 years ago, that the H1N1 vaccine doubled your chances of getting the regular flu, lowered your immunity. We also know that they never get the vaccine correct to actually match what the flu is that year. It's a giant hoax. But tell us more about this graph that we have up on screen.
Well, this one, you take a look, you can see there's hardly any deaths on the left-hand part in the, and all of a sudden, as time goes on, all of a sudden they introduce the flu vaccine, it becomes mandated, all of a sudden the death rate starts skyrocketing, and almost all the deaths in children from the H1N1 were children who were vaccinated with the H1N1.
Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's just frightening, But if you need any for adults, if we go to the next slide, this one is even more frightening because it shows, this is the one that says influenza and pneumonia mortality rates and influenza vaccine coverage. And you take a look at the broken line is the percentage of people receiving the flu vaccine, and the brown line is people who die from flu and pneumonia. The reason pneumonia is because that's what actually kills you, not the flu itself. As the more people in the population get the flu vaccine, more people die from it.
It's incredible, but let's expand. We're going to show one more slide here in a moment. But now, doctor, now that people are waking up and saying no, California passed a law to shoot kids up without telling their parents. Classical fascism, medical tyranny. They're now running hoaxes everywhere. It's the law to take vaccines. I talked to one of my crew members whose wife is an RN, that people got sick when they were forced to take it. And one nurse, a young nurse, is in a wheelchair now, and they're not supposed to talk about it. And I talk to nurses everywhere. I mean, this is like something out of a science fiction movie.
That's right. You couldn't make this up. I mean, here's where the truth is stranger than fiction, more frightening. And let's look at one more slide, and that is the one on United States mortality rates, and that's for measles, scarlet fever, typhoid, whooping cough, diphtheria. And you see, it looks like something scribbled by a kindergarten child. But what you see is that all these diseases in the 1900s, had relatively high mortality. And the mortality rates start dropping. But you take a look, the vaccines are introduced and nothing changes. Because look at scarlet fever, typhoid, no vaccines given for them, they disappear at the same rate. I ask one question of every doctor who still has any hope in vaccines that make any difference. Explain to me how tuberculosis disappeared. Explain to me how cholera, typhoid, Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Explain to me before you start talking about the ones that we give. Unbelievable.
It was sanitation, wasn't it, sir, and better nutrition?
sanitation, and also diseases just have certain periods where they're there and then they just kind of die out by themselves, and all we could do, and whooping cough is a great example. You introduce a vaccine that only works on the mild strains and the other strains are dying out. Now we're seeing whooping cough epidemics, but only really essentially in children who have been vaccinated. Those who have been vaccinated for all practicality have no problem.
Well, see, that's another big thing. I see the numbers even in the mainstream news, but it's buried. I want to come back and talk about this. The vaccines are actually making the children get what they're supposedly fighting. It's incredible.
Exactly, and let me read you one more thing here. And this is an article that was in the medical journal called Vaccine. It's one of those.
Doc, we got a break. Get to that. We got a break. We'll come right back with that, and folks can find out more at homefirst.com. And you can find his books, everything at homefirst.com. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Dr. Eisenstein. All right, Dr. Eisenstein is a best-selling author. He's a very well-respected lawyer, medical doctor. He's treated well over 75,000 children, parents, and grandparents. He's done studies. And he heads up homefirst.com. He's got clinics. I think they're all over Illinois, aren't they, Doc? And you're here giving people numbers, but I live and sleep and breathe media. I see all the stuff you're talking about. I mean, the big pharma knows the vaccines are reducing immunity. They know they're making people get sick. They know they're creating deadly strains, just like overuse of antibiotics. And their answer to our awakening is, okay, we're going to make you. But please continue with that quote you were giving us and tell us again where that came from.
Well, you're talking about here. There's a quote in the journal Vaccine, and it says, a new article in Vaccine sheds light on the online practices of such groups. The global anti-vaccination movement, which is a loose coalition of rogue scientists, so I may fall in that category, journalists, there you are, parents and celebrities who think that vaccines cause disease like autism, a claim that has been thoroughly discredited by modern science. Now, let me tell you what's interesting even about their quote. Going to law school ruins you because you look at every word. Thoroughly discredited. Well, discredited doesn't mean anything. Even their own writing doesn't make any sense. It should be thoroughly disproven, but they don't use the word disproven because they know that's not true. It's been discredited, just like the earth was flat was discredited, and people were hung because of those beliefs, But one more important thing, because a lot of the people listening, Alex, a lot of parents, grandparents, don't want to vaccinate. And many of them have school-age children or high school students or college students. And they've always asked me, what is the best way for me to avoid vaccines? And I put up a map here. And this map of the United States, there's 18 states left. They're green. In Texas, you're in a green state. It has nothing to do with the nonsense of green our jobs. It has to do with they allow a philosophical exemption for vaccines. And if you take a look, every state except Mississippi and West Virginia allow for a religious exemption. So those two states you can't live in. I recommend, and it's in my book, Don't Vaccinate Before You Educate. And I also am going to have a webinar this Sunday evening. And just go to my webpage, homefirst.com, click on the webinar link, and just sign up. It's complimentary. Just all you have to do is put your email address in. And I recommend, if you don't want to vaccinate your children, don't give a philosophical exemption. What does that mean? A philosophical exemption is you don't have to give. I don't believe in vaccines. I don't want to do that. 18 states, including Texas, allows that. Because if you move from Texas to, let's say, Montana or Wyoming or Illinois, they don't allow for that exemption. And if the state legislature can overturn it. But it's still pretty hard to overturn the Constitution, although I thought our president's trying very hard.
Yeah, let's be clear. They've introduced this exemption stuff because they know their so-called law is just really a regulation to attend school, and they kind of trick people into the exemption process itself. I know that I haven't even done the exemption process. They can just go jump in the lake, fly a kite, and go to a very warm place.
Exactly. But But if you have to hand in anything, only hand in a religious exemption that still has protection from the First Amendment. Don't ever hand in a personal belief exemption. And I'll be happy to help anyone who needs some help with that.
You're right. That's much stronger First Amendment. But what if the tyrants do nationwide what they do in the bellwether California doctor and lawyer, Eisenstein? What do we do, counselor, as they export this everywhere? And a child can't buy alcohol, can't have sex, even if they want to when they're 12, because they're not an adult. It's statutory rape. Right. It's contributing to the delinquency of a minor. How does California say then, we're going to brainwash your kid, we're going to shoot them up when they're 12 and not even tell you? I mean, that is outrageous.
It's absolutely outrageous, and the bottom line is you just have to say no. You may have to keep your children out of school. You may have to homeschool your children, which many of my patients do. You may have to send them to a religious school, a small religious school, which will help you avoid vaccines. Look, let me tell you something. It's getting harder and harder, but you have to stop going to doctors. So go to chiropractors, homeopaths, naturopaths, doctors who have had very strong history of being not only against vaccines, but taking a strong look at the dangers of all the pharmaceuticals.
All right, Doc, we got a long segment coming up. I got a lot of questions for you and any points you want to make. You really are one of the most informed people on this subject. But, I mean, this is getting to an insane point here where they're coming for our kids. We're awake. We know what they're doing. They're crooks. They're hurting people. They're eugenicists, like Bayer with the Factor 8 full of HIV knowingly for 10 years shipping it out. And then these murderers are coming for us.
We're on the march. The empire's on.
All right, well, we've definitely got to have him back up just on all of his other knowledge in the near future, because I could talk to Dr. Eisenstein for hours. But when I start thinking about how incredibly creepy it is that Big Pharma can come just lobby and then get government to run a hoax and say a vaccine is mandated or mandatory. And then now they've got people going door to door under a Department of Health program, knocking on doors. I played this clip a bunch and saying, we're coming in to give your child a shot, and trying to intimidate their way in through color of law. I mean, this is hardcore corruption. And in the Soviet Russia, in Nazi Germany, in so many other countries, tyranny first comes in a form of medicalized tyranny through psychiatry and other systems. But I think about the UN, our own government, black men with syphilis, giving them syphilis, Tuskegee. Now we learn they were shooting kids up in Latin America. We learn about the UN doing stuff like this currently, adding sterilants to vaccines. It is a eugenics program. You've got Bill Gates talking about too many people, and if we can vaccinate, we'll lower the population. That's a quote. And then everybody laughing in the audience. These academics. This is really going on. And they want the president to put in our body what they want, when they want, when the Gardasil was killing people during the trials. And so they had Rick Perry come out and mandate it so that it would get government liability protection once it was, quote, mandated by a chief executive like a governor. I mean, these are cold-blooded companies. You were continuing there when we hit that last break, getting into a piece of news, sir. Go ahead.
But, I can tell you what's even more important is I'm listening to what you're saying, Alex. You've had a tremendous impact. Look what happened in 2009. In spite of millions and millions of dollars of advertising how dangerous the swine flu is going to be, the majority of Americans rejected it, even though it was being given free. How much more can you say than that? And one other statistic that came out in 2010, the death